If it has a face, it's a protein. If it ran, swam, or flew on this earth, it's a protein. And if it grows from the ground, it's a carbohydrate. Tough so far. Follow me. Now, when it comes to fats, fats are really important. And they can either come from an animal source or a vegetable source like almonds, avocados, olive oil, and other good healthy fats. And those animal fats I just mentioned, like bacon and butter and lard and grease, those are the ones we want to try to kind of avoid. So in our diet, we need around 15 to 30% of our total calories coming from fat. This drawing right here is an illustration of a human cell, and we have anywhere between 30 to 40 million cells on average, and every single cell is wrapped in fat called a phospholipid bilayer. And inside these cells, well, let me mention, we do need some fat to be able to make more cells, because if we can't make more cells, it's called aging. And most of us don't want to age prematurely. So a really low fat diet can prevent you in regeneration of your cells, because we're tearing down muscle almost daily and we need to repair them, so we need to create more cells. Follow me? So what's interesting, inside of this cell membrane, we have these things called receptors. And receptors are kind of like locks on our doors. They allow certain things to go in our cells, and they allow certain things to go out of our cells. And so whenever we look at carbohydrates, fats, or proteins, again, when we eat them, they don't go right into our cells. They first go right into our stomach. They sit there long enough to get digested. The process of digestion is taking a solid and turning it into a liquid. So our stomach is basically like a blender. And once that food is blended, it leaves our stomach, goes into your intestines, and finally gets absorbed into our bloodstream through a hepatic pathway. Examples of carbs are like oatmeal, vegetables, potato chips. So to rephrase, we eat these carbs, it doesn't go to our muscle cells, goes to your stomach, sit there long enough to get it digested. Once they're turned into liquid, they leave your stomach, they go into your intestines, and they get absorbed into the bloodstream in the form of glucose or blood sugar. Have any of you heard anyone say, I have high blood sugar, or my blood glucose levels are high or low? So there's a high and there's a low. So what's normal? So normal blood glucose levels is anywhere between 80 and 120. And glucose levels in our blood is measured in milligrams per deciliter, which means how much sugar, milligrams, is in how many deciliters, or how much fluid, or how much amount of blood. And our blood is a lot like water. And if I take this water bottle and I start adding sugar or molasses or syrup in it, it gets really thick. And thick blood doesn't circulate really well. And what's really going to happen, your sugar levels will rise as we eat carbohydrates. They get digested and they go to our bloodstream. They go to a certain point, and once they hit a certain point, it's going to get really thick and it can't circulate. And then our body secretes a hormone called insulin. Insulin is the key that binds to every one of these little cells and shoots all this blood glucose in a form of glycogen. And all that glycogen is a whole bunch of glucose hooked together. And this is basically stored energy. So if glucose is sticky, glycogen is so much more sticky than glucose. And it's so concentrated that for every one molecule of glycogen, we pull in 3 times as much water inside the cell. So this bottle right here, this bottle right here is a pint of water, and a pint weighs a pound. So if I weighed myself right now and I drank this bottle of water, then I weighed myself again later, I'm a pound heavier. Am I fatter? No, I'm just less thirsty. So I don't care what the number on the scale in terms of measuring your progress. What really matters is how much room you take up in your clothes or your belt or the mirror. Follow? So somewhere here in my virtual world, I have 5 pounds of muscle and 5 pounds of fat, and it's obviously the same weight. So which 5 pounds would you rather have? So whatever you weigh right now, I give you this muscle, it's 5 pounds more. Would you be fatter? No. What if I took one of these away, 5 pounds of fat, and you weigh 5 pounds less? Then I give you 2 pounds of these, 5 pounds of muscle, you weigh 5 pounds more, so you'd be heavier. So we don't really care how much you weigh, and neither should you. What you should really care is how much room you take up. or another way of saying it, it's called your body fat percentage. And so, well, let me talk about body fat percentage. And there's different ways in measuring body fat percentage. My favorite and what we use at the store is calipers. And calipers actually pinch your skin, and depending how thick your skin is, that tells me how much body fat you have. The thicker your skin, the more fat. And you've seen those handheld devices. And those are okay and decent to use for a super quick reading. And the way they work, those things is, remember how I said that when you eat carbohydrates, blood glucose levels goes in there and stored as glycogen, and then you pull in water? Well, water conducts electricity. So if I punch in this little machine how much I weigh and how tall I am, it knows how much mass I'm made of. Then now I hold that handheld device, or maybe the one you can stand on like this one. It shoots real light ohms of electricity, which means calculating the distance between 2 points from one arm down across to the other arm, or one leg to the other. And there's a little computer in there that times to see how long it takes to go from one side to the other. So the more water I have, the faster the electricity is going to travel. So the leaner I will be, according to this machine. Again, this is a quick generalization calculation because there's a few factors that can alter a body fat reading from any of those devices I just mentioned. So let's just imagine if I drank, for example, wine at night and then coffee in the morning, which both tend to dehydrate you a bit. So if I'm dehydrated, both devices are going to give me a higher body fat reading than what it should be. And then after drinking a gallon of water a day, which I traditionally do, I go home, I remeasure, and damn, my body fat is lower. So, and considering that I'm a male, my fluid levels don't fluctuate as much as females do. So if I had a female client and I happen to use this and it's close to her menstrual cycle, they tend to be higher or might be lower. Okay, so same thing if you just flew on an airplane somewhere, flying makes you a little bit dehydrated. So that can too also be not so accurate reading. So these are really good if we have a really stabilized meal plan and we're consistent with our hydration status and so on. But let's face it, when you exercise, you sweat, you perspire. So if I were to measure your body fat afterwards, you'll probably be a little more fatter than if you did before. Now with calipers, I like using them, and there's about 20 different formulas you can use. So when we do body fat measurements, I do a 3-point measurement. Men, it's chest, abs, and thigh. For women, it's tricep, suprailiac, and thigh as well. When testing for a client that's doing a bodybuilding show, I do a 7-point measurement called the Jackson-Pollock method, because the more points to pinch, I'll have a more accurate measurement of their body fat leading up to their competition. Another reason I like using calipers, an example, if my client was a woman, I measure her tricep, her iliac crest, and her thigh 1 week, and then the next week after I measure again the same, and her iliac crest and her thigh went down, but her tricep went up. Well, have you ever noticed when you burn your finger on a stove, you get this little welt on the top and it looks swollen? Well, when you're working out with weights, you're tearing down muscle tissue. So when your body covers it with fluid to repair that tissue, and that usually takes about 24 to 72 hours from the time you work out. So if I did chest really hard today, for the next 2 to 3 days, I'll be a little tender and puffy. So if I measure my client's triceps and they're higher, but her waist and her thigh is lower, we don't gain fat in our arms and lose it everywhere else. We tend to gain it evenly and lose it evenly. So I probably know that she trained arms or chest, because you also use your triceps when you train chest, the last 24 to 72 hours. So, and if her thigh was higher and her waist and triceps are lower, well, she probably did legs within 24 to 72 hours. Now, if her waist was higher and it's a female, it could be that she's starting her menstrual cycle or that she's retaining sodium. Perhaps maybe a dinner from a restaurant from the night before. And if it's a male, more likely he's just retaining sodium. He probably just ate too much salt. So this machine gives me a little bit more idea on what's going on with my clients, where, this one's a quick one measurement to use. This one right here, I mean, it's kind of like what they're doing. They're just okay machines. So if you want something quick, again, they're not the most accurate, but it's quick. And these are all just estimations. To really know what your body fat is, there's a body scan called DEXA, and DEXA will scan your whole body, which tells us your body fat. your skin thickness, your bone thickness, how much fat you really have, how much muscle mass you have, and so on. It's really not cheap. I think the last time I checked was about from $130 to about up to $400 to have it done. And there's also hydrostatic weighing, or that underwater dunk tank, where you can get measured while you're underwater, and that can be around $50 to $100. But I don't expect you to spend that much money for the test. What I really want to do with my clients is to establish a consistent trend. And I don't care how much fat you truly have. I just want to see if you're dropping fat and gaining or maintaining lean muscle over time. One final note, these calipers are only as good as the person who's doing the pinching. All right, so going back to my drawing board, let's refresh really quick. So again, when we eat carbs, they first go to our stomach, they get digested, leave our stomach, then it goes to our intestines where it gets absorbed in the bloodstream called glucose, okay? And then glucose levels will go up, and then our body secretes a hormone called insulin, right? And insulin shoots all this glucose into our muscle cells, puts water in there, and the sugars that was in our blood is now stored. Now, in the end, our blood sugars levels drop. So anytime we're below 80 in 120, we're hungry again. So we wanted to know how long it took from the time we ate till the time we got hungry again. So there's a study called Gastric emptying time, which just means how long does it take food to leave your stomach. And there's a study called the gastric emptying time, which just means how long does it take food to leave your stomach. And what was interesting is they found that carbohydrates tend to stay in your stomach, for about 1 hour. For example, if you eat oatmeal for breakfast, from the time you have your oatmeal to the time your sugar levels drop, it's usually about 30 to 45 minutes to an hour at tops. Protein, on the other hand, tends to stay in your stomach for about 2 hours, right? Fats, 3 to 5 hours. And what was interesting, but one thing that research found was really interesting, was when you combine a carbohydrate with a protein, okay? And most proteins have a little bit of fat, even though you're eating really lean chicken, there's still a little fat in there. So both the fat and the protein would keep your carbs in your stomach a little longer, slowing down gastric emptying time. And your sugar levels would just go up slowly, right? And then come down really slowly. Okay, so from the time you eat to the time you're hungry again is now 3.5 to 4 hours. So how many of you have heard I should be eating every 3 to 4 hours? Well, now you know why.